Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Justice is Here podcast, where you get to learn all about the greatest political party that there is, the Justice for All Party. I'm your host, Tracy. I'm going to let my host, trying to make you something you're not. I'm going to let my guest introduce himself here in just a moment. But first, we have a couple of bills to pay. So, to learn about the Justice for All Party, you can still go to CornellWest2024.com. You can see the platform. You can sign up to volunteer. You can also donate. So, like in episode one, I'm challenging everybody that's watching this podcast to don't try to donate at least $5. If a couple of us do that, it'll make a huge difference. So, follow the Cornell West 2024.com/donate link to donate your $5. Please subscribe. I know I've been begging and I've been begging and I've been begging and I've been begging and I've been begging. But please subscribe. We're at 321. And so now you all know that my goal is 1,000. So that makes us 679. I think that's the number. My math might be bad, but 679 subscribers to go until I hit 1,000. The more subscribers we get, the better. And it's absolutely free. As usual, you help us in our 35 likes and 15 shares campaign. We're asking that you, of course, like this. 35 of you like this podcast, and 15 of you share it to all your platforms. And I'm inviting you personally to the Saturday Hangout. It's the fourth Saturday of every month starting March the 22nd. If you would like me to just email you one, just email me at Tracy M. Carson74@gmail.com and I'll send you the invite link. But you do have to register. We'll be talking about, discuss, debate, and organize. That's the hashtag. So that's every fourth Saturday. It's called the Saturday Hangout. I'm looking forward to having people there. And Rue, by the way, is here. Hello, Rue, by the way. Of course, he's right. Hit that like button on the way in. And now we're at 323. So got to do new math to this afternoon. So keep those growing. Okay. So I am going to let my guest introduce himself.
Hi. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for having me. My name is Mike McCorkle. I am an attorney, and this past year I had the privilege of being legal counsel to Dr. Cornel West's presidential campaign. That was a lot of fun, as you can imagine. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome, and I'm going to have a whole lot of ballot access questions because it's one of the things that really frustrates me about running a presidential, now I can say it, running a presidential campaign. The rules are not the same. One state has one set of guidelines, another state has another. Some states have what I call impossible signature requirements that no matter how much you try, you're not going to get them. And if by some little miracle that you reach the number, they throw them out for, I call it petty. I don't know what you call it, but talk about in general, what were the challenges in getting ballot access? Because I know the original goal was ballot access in all 50 states. And I think we ended up getting 19, or was it somewhere around there?
It was somewhere around there. Yeah. And petty is probably a good word for it, considering that you instructed me before that there's no custom on your show. So we'll stick with a petty. I think that'll work for it. The political parties that are in power have used their power in many states, not all, but in many states, to make it very, very difficult for anybody to compete with them. So we've got all of this as a society, all this bemoaning the polarization of our society. At the same time, we've got legal structures that lock us into two choices and only two choices. And so, yeah, we had challenges of all kinds. Hyper technical is what one of the lawyers on our side called the challenges in Wisconsin, for example, where the challenge came down to they were claiming that there were a couple of pages that should have been stapled and they weren't. And nowhere in the rules does it say that they must be stapled. It was clear the papers belonged together. But on the basis of that argument, the Democratic Party, this was an action that was brought by the director of operations of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. So it was in-house the Democratic Party that did this.
I don't believe you. They would never do something like that. I mean, they have democracy in their name. That was the most sarcastic statement. I want everybody to pick up on that sarcasm. Don't use that clip and say that I'm saying something good about Democrats. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, I think many Democrats, especially on the left, need to be awakened to these facts. I spent a few years, for the sake of Bernie Sanders, who still owes me at least a cup of coffee for my trouble, in the Democratic Party here in Colorado, and I was on the state executive committee. I was a delegate to the 2 national conventions for Bernie, and so I know they pride themselves on, we're the party that supports voter freedom and so on. But they certainly were in favor of throwing out thousands and thousands of voter signatures on the pettiest of reasons. And right now, around the country, there are Democratic legislatures, like New Jersey just passed a law that made it a little bit more difficult. It's still a fairly easy state, but made it a little more difficult to get on the ballot as an independent there. Republicans in the state of Montana have got a bill going through to do the same kind of thing there, to make it more difficult. And in this way, the duopoly, as people call it, really enforces their control over our political ecosystem, and they prevent other voices from participating in our democracy, even though, like here in Colorado, half of the voting population is unaffiliated. We don't want to belong to their parties, but if you want to get onto the ballot in many places, they make it very, very difficult. In fact, the litigation in Pennsylvania, where Dr. West was a witness on the stand in our case in federal court there, that case, we at one point we asked the Supreme Court to weigh in. They told us to get lost. But that case is still alive. In fact, just this past week, in the past few days, that case was agreed to go to mediation to be hashed out between the parties and maybe a settlement reach, which some of the academic observers interpret as a sign that Pennsylvania is finally, belatedly, going to back down, and they're going to agree to no longer require some of the paperwork they did for our presidential elector folks in Pennsylvania. So we're continuing to try to notch wins because we did have challenges in more than a third of the country. And we won almost all of those challenges. And we were able to get on the ballot in those places where we had sufficient popular support to mount a case for it. So Pennsylvania, we may still get a positive result for the future, even though it won't do us any good, obviously.
And that's why I wanted, when Ezra and I talked about what the focus of this podcast was going to be, he immediately said ballot access, and it made sense to me, because if for a party to say, and that's my insulin pump like beeping to the crazy hills. Let me turn. I'm sorry, I got to turn this thing, dismiss this thing, and then I'll get to my question. Okay, so I think it annoys me to what they get away with. And one of the things reasons why I think bringing you on here is not only to talk about those challenges and talk about the wins, but how's that going to work in future? Because, we're building a justice for all party. We're going to have to go with ballot access again. I live in Indiana, one of the hardest states I don't care what anybody says, Indiana is a very difficult state for a presidential candidate to get on. I think about the Green Party, they actually had 50,000 signatures, which is well over the 37,763 that they require. And they threw out just enough for them not to make the ballot. And what happens, and this is why I want our audience to like put their questions in the comment section. A campaign like the Dr. West campaign, they don't have money to go out and fight these cases in court. When you file a court case, those things cost money. You have a judge, you have a defense, you have a prosecutor. I don't know if it's a jury. I don't think it's a jury trial, but those things cost money to file. And so if the Democrats and Republicans can get people to spend their money over here in court, it's going to be hard to put that money on the ground. Can you kind of address that? Or was I somewhere in the vein? Am I somewhere near close to where I should be, or am I just totally off?
Now, you're describing my suffering last summer, yes. When it began to be clear that, for example, in North Carolina, that they were going to pull whatever stunts they had to ensure that we and any other minor party were going to be kept off of the ballot. We needed lawyers. You need not just lawyers who are the rare sort who study this sort of election law, ballot access law, and do this kind of thing, but you have to have a lawyer there on the ground in the jurisdiction. I'm a Colorado attorney. If I go in the door of a North Carolina courthouse, I'm not allowed. I'm just like anybody else. I'm not a lawyer there. So we had to find a lot of legal help, and people were not willing to help us because if they know this kind of law, they tend to be already working for. In fact, that was the case in North Carolina. The first person I phoned couldn't help actually because he's married to one of the people on the Board of Elections who was messing us over. And then he referred me to a friend, and that guy was representing the Democratic Party against us. Everybody who does this kind of law tended to be against us. So it was an ongoing challenge, and we're very grateful for some of the groups that came in and some of the attorneys, really great attorneys who came in around the country to provide their expertise, often pro bono, to the benefit of our presidential elector candidates, and just on the principle that the ballots belong to the people and not to these two big parties. And you're exactly right. It is a deliberate diversion. It kept us occupied literally up until Election Day with getting onto the ballot, or at least getting write-in access, even in states where it shouldn't be that difficult to there's already a line there. But they kept us busy with that while their campaigns had all of this time to be doing message. We were spending money and resources and energy on just being able to get into the game. And it's patently unfair. But, if you've got nothing good to say about peace in the Middle East, if you've got nothing good to say about helping the poor in this country or elsewhere, then you want to keep parties and movements and candidates like ours out of the conversation. It makes it very uncomfortable for them when they have to actually compete with us.
And that's the thing that, thank you. At least I know I'm not off on this, because this is how I feel. And some people will say this is a very simplistic idea, and I tend to operate on emotion instead of logic. But here's what I'll say. If I am running for office, and I'm a Democrat, I'm not, because I haven't voted Democrat in years, but I'm just using this as an example. And somebody with the Justice for All party runs, if I feel like I'm the better candidate, let them be on the ballot. Just declare you're running, pay a little fee, you're on the ballot, the end. And I don't know if we can ever get to that point, but that's how simple I feel like it should be, especially running for president. You declare your candidacy, you file your paperwork with the FEC, pay a little fee, the end.
Yeah, in fact, one of the reasons why legally it is, in some respects, easier for a presidential candidate is because the courts have recognized that the rules in one state, in this case, they have effects beyond just the borders of that state, right? It's a national election. And if you're keeping candidates off in some parts of the country, you're tinkering with a national exercise of democracy with your local rules. And so that has been recognized by the courts, and that did do us some good, I think, in the litigation and the challenges that we brought. It'll be a different matter for starting a new political party and gaining political access or ballot access for new political parties. In some respects, in many places, it may be easier. An independent candidacy, the courts allow the state to make that a little bit more difficult because who are you? You're just somebody with a name. You're not part of a group. There's no evidence that the public wants you on the ballot. So that's why they send you out to do a petition or something like that. I think often, like in Indiana, those requirements are far more stringent and demanding than they need to be. But still, that's the idea: is show us that the public wants you on the ballot. But if you've got a political party, if you've got a group of people in the state who have gotten together and organized a Justice for All chapter, or Greens, or any of these other groups, if you've got a political party of some kind, the presence, the existence of that group already announces to the state that these are people who care about this. These are people who want ballot access, and that power of association, that First Amendment right of association, becomes very powerful when it's exercised by a party. So that if we have a bunch of people who go out and establish Justice for All groups in their states, and there's organizing a political committee and then worrying about ballot access. But if you organize those groups and we had ballot access in a bunch of different states around the country, then anybody running for president or for office in the future is going to have an easier road to go. Generally, it was much easier in a place like here in Colorado, where Dr. West was nominated by the Unity Party, and thank you to them for that nomination. It's a small party. It was a small vote. It only took a few dozen people. It was pretty unanimous, pretty much. But it was a small vote. It was a convention, and all we did then is fill out the paperwork and turn it in at the Secretary of State's office, and it was done.
Yeah.
Compared to other states where it's like, in Florida, they required 150,000 votes for independent candidates. Texas required 150,000, or I think 132,000 votes. About almost 40 states in the country require, I think, less than 10,000 votes or less, which is a pretty tough hill. But then you've got these outlier states like Indiana that are extremely difficult. So,
You mean the Texas in the north? That's what that's what I'm calling Indiana from now on. That's my name. I'm like, anything Texas does is like, okay, we'll follow in 9, 10. Here we go. We have some comments to get to before I hit my next question. Nelson, hello, cousin Nelson. There's no time to waste to get as many people beyond the truth, justice, and love party agenda to be ready for 2028 to fight against the establishment. But I'm also going to add in 2026 because that's the midterms. But I get your sentiment, absolutely. State of Florida rejected ballot access to the Natural Law Party over staples or paper. See, this is the kind of pettiness, foolishness that gets on it irks my nerves. It irks my nerves. Why not just come out and say, we're scared of this party? I'd rather you say that than do stuff like rejecting something because of a staple or a paperclip. That's just me. I just had to get that off my chest. And Rue, by the way, absolutely not. I've told y'all last week, I refused to run for office because of my no hold bars. I say what I think, and I really don't care if I hurt your feelings type of thing. And I'm more likely to hurt those on the left of me than to the right of me. So no, but Mike McCorkle 2026 sounds just fine to me.
Oh, sure. Throw me under the bus. No, I think it's frustrating to you because you're exactly right about it. You're paying attention.
justice for all party candidates under formation in Indiana to Colorado. That's exactly right, and all across the nation. I want to talk, and the reason again that I'm talking about ballot access is with this: unless our Congress wakes up, they won't. They won't let them. I'm here to tell you guys, they won't wake up. They're going to try to make things harder, right? They're going to try to make things more difficult, more more challenging for third-party candidates to get onto the ballot. But I want to talk about what issues that you saw in this campaign that may be issues in terms of running, and I'm just going to say a congressional candidate. We're not even going to talk about presidential at this term because I want to talk about midterms first and then presidential second.
Well, the principles, the slogan, and sort of the anchor of the campaign, truth, justice, and love, is, I think, the basis of a competitive platform in today's congressional races. When you've got a clown like George Santos, if that's even his real name, right? I mean, you've got people who are just professional liars, and they get the liar's dividend too, because when somebody calls them a liar, they say your information is a lie, fake news, or whatever. So truth, I think, is competitive with that, because the people cannot not be lied to forever without catching on, and they're going to be mad when they realize. I think the people historically have been mad when they realize that they're being lied to. So candidates who are running on just openness and truth and transparency, for one thing, and then justice and love, you can group together, because, like Dr. West says, justice is what love looks like in public, right? And we've got this polarization with these two parties that represent sort of corporate powers, and they are locked in battle with one another, and it has polarized the country. It has deteriorated our public institutions, and the way out is, in my opinion, to allow for competition, to allow for minor parties, even if like in the past, minor parties have sometimes been absorbed or their issues have been co-opted. Let them co-opt us on truth, justice, and love. Let one of the parties steal our platform of truth, justice, and love. I would love to face that kind of competition, but I don't think anybody is offering that kind of product in the political marketplace right now. And moreover, in many, many districts around the country, state legislative and federal races even too, only one of the major parties is competing, because the districts have been drawn so that there's only one competitive party. So
Yes, where you get swing states at. I mean,
right.
that term shouldn't even exist. All 50 states and DC, I always forget DC, but all 50 states and DC should have equal importance. It shouldn't matter whether you live in California or Rhode Island. You're both American citizens, but that's where we get, that's where we get these swing states because of the way the maps are drawn. And that's another reason why I continue to say I'm challenging everybody. I always challenge people. This is the second episode of the Justice is Here podcast. Donate $5, because if you think they're acting a fool now, they're going to turn it up in 2026. That's the goal. That's what they're trying to do. And we need money to prepare ourselves for that. And of course, we're going to need money to put people on the ground, do the petitions gathering. But we need to prepare ourselves for that, because they already are acting like clowns. I hear people that say they're independent, and I'm like, why are you sitting here telling this lie? All you do is simp for the Democratic Party. And I know that my question isn't going to make a lot of sense, so I might have to repeat it. But when you have these access laws, we need to do a better job. And I'm saying I know Mike is doing it in his court cases, but I'm talking about on the ground, reaching out to people and organizing and saying, hey, these parties are lying to you. They're scared. That's why they're making it hard to put up these outrageous signature gatherings. I mean, just outrageous. I think in Texas they said that they had 145,000 they have to get, but they couldn't get anybody that voted in the primaries. Like, how are they supposed to know that? We need to be telling the public, hey, this is how scared they are. They know they're crooks and they know we're out here, and we're going to keep telling you that they don't mean you any good. Just wanted to say that, again, in terms of me challenging everybody that can to keep, I'm going to keep challenging people on this podcast to donate that $5 because we need to be prepared. Because I'm telling you guys, the Democratic Party, especially, I think they spent like $20 million to keep third-party candidates off the ballot.
Yeah, that's two Beyonce's worth, right? They paid her $10 million, right? And
they paid who $10 million?
Beyonce. That's two Beyonce's worth of money they spent just trying to keep.
Yeah, and that's what three M&Ms because he they paid him $5 million. I'm like, no, that's $4 because they paid him $5 million, Beyonce 10. And you're telling me this party is for you? I can't understand. But talk about what it takes to keep going to court and keep, like, I would think the judge would be like, well, this is stupid. This is silly. Why am I listening to this case? But apparently judges, especially in Pennsylvania, I'm still angry with you. If I didn't hate the Kansas City Chiefs, I would be cheering for them in the Super Bowl. That's how disappointed I am in the state of Pennsylvania, especially when Dr. West had enough signatures, he was right there. And you just, and even in Indiana, we had a case go to court. The judge literally said, oh, you make a great case, but it would upset the system too much. What's that? It's like we need a whole, seems to me like we need a whole structural change, like a whole systematic change the whole thing, because it seems like the judges are either stupid. I hate to call people stupid. They're either in bed with the two-party system, which is what I think, or they're completely stupid, or a combination of both.
Well, how did they get to be judges? In many places, they ran
right
for office, or they were appointed by one party or the other in the legislature. So they are coming from that same class of people who in the legislature have enacted these rules to begin with. And then also just there aren't very many election law cases. So judges often don't see very many of them, and they'll just swing and they'll miss sometimes. They famously, Sandra Day O'Connor on the Supreme Court on some election law matter voted one way, and then the next time it came up she voted the other direction, and the next time it came up she went the other direction, like she couldn't even remember what she thought about the thing, because it was over like 30 years those cases came up. So judges will whiff on it sometimes, and be overly, I think, deferential to the two major parties. But this is a good time for you to be raising this issue for viewers, because right now your legislature is in session in your state. And there are states where they are one party, the other is making things more difficult. I think one state, there was a bill to make things easier. There was a bill advancing in New York State that might make ballot access easier. But now is the time when legislatures are working on that. So now is the time to be contacting your state legislature and maybe ask them, if you're wanting to start justice for all in your state, maybe point out that there are states like Vermont where to start the party, you get a few people together in a county. If you have 3 people, I think it is, you have a county committee. And once you have 3 counties with a committee, you can form a state committee. You send the names to the state and you're a party. You have ballot access. And Vermont has not fallen into Somalia-like chaos and anarchy. Things are fine there. So how do you justify in another state making it so much more difficult? Now is the time to ask those questions of your legislature.
Absolutely. And I think another important thing to do again is we as petition gatherers, we need to start again telling the public, hey, look, this is what they're doing. You say that you're tired of the two-party system. Of course, you don't vote for third-party candidates. That's a whole different discussion. But in general, you say you're tired of both systems. Just get us on the ballot. That's all we're asking. We just want equal access under the law. We aren't asking for billions of dollars. You know, we're not the Democratic Party. We don't raise billions of dollars and get our money from APAC and the pharmaceutical industry and all of these things. We just want on the ballot because it's our right to be on the ballot. And I would encourage everybody to do at least that. Oh, and donate your $5 to Cornel West 2024.com/donate. But we got some more comments. And this one I actually want to have you address because I think this is a good question. So I'm going to try to pronounce this name and I'm going to get it wrong. So please do not be offended. Al Zarin. I know I got it wrong. Thank you for commenting. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. 620 individuals registered with the FEC as a candidate for the 2024 office of president. Is this a good or a bad thing for our Justice for All party? Because I don't know how to pronounce that word.
Mason, yeah, our new party. That's an interesting question. It certainly does show that there is an appetite for people to run for office, and you know, anybody who cares about the world and cares about this country, looking on at the way that the two major parties are conducting themselves, I think it's natural for many people to feel like, I should step up. It's not enough to just complain. I should step up and try to fix things. And so in 2020, I think there were something like 27, 29 presidential candidates who actually made it on the ballot here in Colorado. It's the longest presidential ballot we've ever had here. And they did tighten things up a little bit there to make it not quite such a crowded ballot. But I think it does indicate that people are thirsty for something outside of the two major parties and the polarization that comes with those two parties. And where there's a demand for it, there are people who will try to answer that demand. And, you know, I may not agree with them on the policies, but I applaud their concern for our country and the initiative of standing up to run for office. Hopefully, with JFA standing up political organizations around the country, people with that kind of an impulse, they may be better off, running for Congress. They may be better off running for a state or a local office, but we can provide the kind of vehicle that can give, some momentum to those kinds of ambitions and that kind of passion to see things change. So it does give me some hope.
Another thing I wanted to talk about is this criticism that I often heard during when Dr. West was running and Dr. Abdullah were running the campaign or being a part of the campaign. Let me say this. I heard a lot of silly things and a lot of stupid things, but this one to me was tops. And it's in terms of the West campaign being assisted by attorneys from other parties like the libertarian parties. And that somehow this fact, because was saying that, Dr. West isn't serious. He's a Republican opt. He's being paid by Trump to run to take away votes from Harris. What do you say to those people that think that way? Because I had some choice words, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to say what I said.
Well, I'm not allowed to. You said before we got on.
I know, but
no cussing, so I can't.
I didn't cuss when I said it, but I'm like, I'll let you say your answer, and then I'll say what mine is.
The folks who work for the Democratic Party tend to only work for the Democratic Party, and very, very few lawyers practice this kind of law. Here in Colorado, during our campaign, in fact, there were some Democratic congressional campaigns that were trying to get me to help them with an issue that arose during their primary. And I was simply too busy. I was way too busy, even at that point, pretty early on. And so I couldn't help them. And I tried referring them to my friend who does election law. I know one other person here personally who does that kind of stuff. He's already working for the Democratic Party against them on that situation. It turned out that, like, here in Colorado, maybe half a dozen lawyers who even do this kind of thing. They got somebody ultimately who doesn't do this kind of thing. I think he filed it wrong. I'm not sure, but I think he filed it wrong, and they got thrown out of court. They didn't win. So in North Carolina, like I mentioned, usually, as I mentioned, I've worked on the left. I was a Bernie Sanders delegate. I was involved with the Democratic Party here up until 2020, 2021, I think. So those are the people who I tend to know. In North Carolina, when it became clear to me that we're going to need First Amendment help, I called on the person who is reputed to be, and I think probably is, the best First Amendment lawyer in the state of North Carolina. But as I said, spouse on the Board of Elections that was against us, so he couldn't help us. He referred me to another good lawyer. That guy had to stop me right away because I think I'm representing the Democratic Party against you guys. Let me give you the name of somebody else. He was at least friendly and cordial. Let me give you the name of somebody else. On and on it went like this. We were calling civil rights firms. We were calling anybody we could find, anybody we could think of. Most of them did not even call us back. Most of them just blew us off. A presidential campaign needing help. We get calls like that every day. So they blew it off. They had no interest in helping us. Finally, I got calls back from two places, and one guy said, yes, I will help, and I can help for nothing. I can help your electors there in North Carolina, because it was really their case, not the campaign's, and they couldn't pay tens of thousands of dollars for a lawyer. So he said he was willing to help, and he does do election law, but he told me, I feel like I have to let you know, I'm a Republican. And my response to him at that point was, as you can imagine, I don't care. I need a lawyer who can get us in the courtroom on Monday, and it's now Thursday. So I don't care. Sign us up. We'll take anybody we can, because it's just another sleazy rigging of the game, in my opinion, that they, for one thing, set the rules in such an obnoxiously difficult way. And then when you get into a fight with them about it, they try to embargo any legal counsel. It's unethical, I think, for attorneys to put their political allegiance ahead of the need of parties to be represented in court. It's unprofessional. But that's what we ran into, and we ran into it everywhere. So I meant it when I said I am deeply grateful for groups like the Voters' Choice Fund, I think was one of them, the Center for Competitive Democracy. We had amazing lawyers who stepped forward to represent not the campaign necessarily, but our voters, the people who did the petitions and whose work was going to be thrown out. And they represented them often for nothing. And that's why I'm so grateful for them. I don't care what party they're in. I don't care that we probably disagree with them on policy matters. There's a difference between being friends and being allies. And when the Democrats brought such an unfair fight to this campaign and the other third-party campaigns, Claudia Dela Cruz, for example, then we were taking help anywhere we could get it. And I make no apology for that. And to try to indict the campaign as being somehow compromised by that fact, I think carefully ignores the guilt that the Democrats have in creating the situation where we had nobody else to turn to, literally had nobody else to turn to.
Yeah, your answer was still better than mine.
Well, and I managed to not cuss and get in trouble with you as well.
I know. My answer was this. In summary, I asked a question, because when people say that, I'm like, okay, if the West campaign was being infiltrated by Republicans and he's getting all this Republican support, how come he doesn't have as much money as he should, right? Because don't you think it would take money to run those type of campaigns? And then second point, what is it that the Democrats are so scared of? I mean, democracy is just a debate of the ideas. And whatever idea works best should win, right? That's what you say you believe. As a democratic society living in a republic, you should be open to as many candidates running for an office. Why would you just be why would you be opposed to a Dr. Cornel West running? It's either you're scared, which that's what I think it is, or you know that he's going, and I hate the word take votes away because votes are earned, they don't belong to people. You have to actually earn them. But this whole, well, he's just taking away a vote from this person. No, you have to earn them. And that's the corporate Democratic, like, public speak they get. And I don't think we're calling it out enough. I just think we're just like, I'm like, no.
Yeah. And the Democrats were found, the Associated Press ran some stories on it. When the campaign finance filings came out after Election Day, the Democrats have been found that they were funding PACs on the right as well. They were doing the same kind of thing, that they were so upset that people on the right might be helping us out. Maybe they were. Maybe they don't want to be Republicans anymore. I could relate to that. But the Democrats were doing the same exact thing.
Running, yes, against, and they did it. And people who I call them, they drink that blue. There's red MAGA, which annoys me, but then there's blue MAGA, which irritates me to all ends. Well, you got to do it. No, you actually don't have to do that. You could just let, I don't know, voters choose who they want. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being silly again. Maybe I just don't understand how the system works. But if your campaign is so great, you could save yourself $20 million by not taking anybody to court. You can just let them run. Just let them run. You say you had the best ideas, prove it.
Exactly. You know, if the public isn't with them, they're going nowhere anyway. And if the public is with them, how dare you stand in their way?
Even with the public isn't. I mean, look at what's happening. And I know this is way off the subject, but look at how some of the blue MAGA people are blaming people that didn't vote for Harris. And it's like, well, this is just what you get with Trump, with his executive. That's not going to convince me to vote for you. I hope you know that doesn't work. I'm just giving you free stuff. But keep doing what you're doing, because your party's dead. It's beyond redeemable. Just keep doing you. Do you. That's what, keep doing it. But you're not saying anything that's going to convince me, because I know how you work. I know that the Democratic Party, for some reason, thought, and I know why they did this, making it harder for people to get on the ballot. It's not just a Democratic thing. I'm going to make this point. I got to make my question is not coming out right. So I'm going to skip that, because I just literally forgot my question. I want to go to some of the comments here, because this one, I want you to answer this. Kay Hopkins, hello, Kay Hopkins. If you haven't subscribed, please do hit that subscribe button and now let it destroy it. Would the ACLU help out in election issues? I wondered this one myself, because I would figure, oh, well, they'd be a natural ally.
They often will, and they are at least friendly in responding. But as you can imagine, a group that protects civil liberties is very, very busy in today's America. Very often when they are involved in cases lately, they'll be involved early on when a state tries to make some change, or the districts get drawn and they detect a violation of the Voting Rights Act or something like that. They tend to get into those things. So that's a sweet one. I love y'all too. Or
it could be this one. The Dems from ACLU. I'm just saying, he's just saying, Rubai Way's just saying, I'm like, then that thought popped in my mind.
Well, they do a lot of very important work, and election stuff is kind of a niche matter. So they have been supportive. I did turn to them to try to get some referrals to attorneys in some places. And without getting into too much detail, I think that we may have some opportunity to work with the California ACLU on establishing the Justice for All party there, because in California, such a progressive state, right? But it's incredibly difficult to establish a new political party there or to get somebody on the ballot as an independent. And as we discovered, our friends in California ran into a lot of difficulty confirming that people were being correctly enrolled with the Justice for All party and that they were being correctly counted by the state, because you have to get to a certain number to qualify as a party. And with all of those difficulties that are just unjustifiable, it shouldn't be that much easier to just get this stuff done in other states. And a state like California makes it crazy difficult. It's not
And
rocket science. So the ACLU may come to our assistance there. I think there had been some conversations. Dr. Abdullah, she had a lot of good ideas during the campaign, and that was, I think, one of her good ideas was to get the ACLU involved in those conversations.
and I'm going to suggest another group, the NAACP. Were you all, was the campaign in contact with them? Because I know they do voters. I know they do. I don't know if they do ballot access per se, but I don't know. I just thought NAACP might be a good one.
Yeah, I went through that. That was my first bunch of lawyers in North Carolina, and then in Georgia later too, when we needed local counsel, was all the civil rights firms. And man, even where we had personal connections and stuff, where I could get somebody's personal email, a lot of times we got no reply at all. They just didn't want to know.
Yep. Okay. And here's a question I want to ask, because again, this is something I'm not. I have no expertise at all. I would think that in federal elections, we're not talking about Congress, governor, or whatever. In federal elections, why can't it be, well, ultimately, my ultimate would be, hey, say you're running for president, the FEC decides a fee of $5,000 or whatever it takes, and then you're on the ballot in every state. Okay, let's forget that. Let's just say they're not going to go for that, because pretty much anybody can raise $5,000. Why can't the ballot access laws be, and I'm only talking about federal elections, why can't they be the same, since we're talking about federal elections? Is this because that's where I don't understand, why can't they be the same? I get, well, governor, like Indiana doesn't have the population of California. California doesn't have the same population as Wyoming. But again, I'm only talking about federal, like I'm only talking about the president of the United States.
I think it comes down to largely the fact that there's more than one elections clause in the United States Constitution. There's one elections clause in Article 1 that talks about the election of Congress members, the U.S. House of Representatives. And there's then a different language in Article 2, which later got replaced in an amendment soon after. And then when the U.S. Senate became popularly elected, that constitutional amendment has a different elections clause. And when it comes to presidential elections, the way the elections clause is written, it really gives the states almost unlimited, unrestricted authority about how they choose their presidential electors. They don't even have to have an election. That's what the Supreme Court told the country in Bush v. Gore, that they could just decide who their electors are going to be. When it comes to Congress and the U.S. Senate, the way that the elections clause is written for those offices, it does give Congress authority to regulate the elections while leaving to the states the authority to make laws respecting the time, place, and manner of the elections. And it's under that manner heading that I think that they get in, that they are able to set a lot of the conditions for ballot access. But the federal government could, because of the way that the elections clause is written, they could pass a law in Congress that says for federal elections, when people are running for the United States Senate or the United States House of Representatives, you have to make it easy for them to be on the ballot. You have to make that easy in the states, and that would be constitutional. I think that would stand up. And what's happened in the past, in the early 1960s, that's what happened to the poll tax. Is first Congress got rid of it at the federal level, and then states found it unwieldy to try to manage it just with the states. And many states had already moved at that point, but that led to the rest of the states giving up on the poll tax, and literacy tests and things like that have worked the same kind of way in the past, these sort of structural things that affect people's ability to organize. So it's possible that we could see progress in that way.
Because I was wondering, I'm like, well, how come it's just not like 500 per state? And that's it. And that's all you need. Because again, they're not going to go for my idea, pay $5,000, you're on the ballot, that's it, and you're automatic. That would make the most sense. But then that's a fee to run for office. And then that's I guess that's a whole nother legal issue. But I'm not going to say anything is better than what we have now, because that's not going to happen. So I guess now I'm asking is what system do you think would be better in terms of how, and again, we're just talking about federal. We're not talking about Congress or Senate or governor or mayor. We're talking about literally just one office. Do you think there should be more uniformity? Or do you just think, oh, New York should get to determine their laws, and then New Jersey should do theirs, and then et cetera, et cetera?
Well, when it comes to the presidential elections alone, if those are the ones that you're isolating and speaking about, because of the way that the elections clause is written in the Constitution, the federal government really has very little authority to dictate that. I think it may have been thought when the Constitution was written that if you're already in charge of the federal government, then if you have too much say over the elections process, you might make it very difficult for your opponents. And after all, that's exactly what they've done in the states, right?
That's what I was going to say. That's exactly what they did. That's what they're doing now.
So it turned out it was a good thing for them to be worried about. But when it came to the election of that one federal office, because you're right, even though Congress and U.S. Senate are federal offices, they're elected within the state. They're elected by the people of a state or a part of a state. The president is elected nationally. And I think for that reason, they wrote it differently in the Constitution. So it would be very difficult, I think. It would probably require, well, properly, it would require an amendment to the Constitution. I guess these days you could also say, if we had our own raft of crazy Supreme Court justices who are ready to just do whatever, then we could get it done that way too. But I think that the more likely path to making things easier on the congressional and Senate side it is possible legislation could be made effective against all the states when it comes to ballot access for those offices. For the presidency, the best route might be through litigation. And one of the things that I've been trying to gather information and work on is establishing information that people in the next presidential election can use to go to court and make the case against states like Pennsylvania and Indiana, states that make it very difficult to lay out the case for them that, again, it's very easy in all of these other states and nothing terrible has happened. So how do you justify making it this much more difficult in your state? How is that necessary to prevent chaos if it hasn't caused chaos in other places? Why defend this as something other than just protecting your two parties so that you don't have to compete in the arena of ideas and policies and ideals? And so it may be litigation. And I think that this campaign laid some important groundwork. We got some important wins. We got a good case opinion in North Carolina. I think we're on our way to a good ultimate result in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, although it's a shame that it's taken this long. So
they didn't know the election is over. They didn't know that.
That was their excuse. They were one of those states, like you alluded to before, where they were like, well, yeah, we blew it. This is unconstitutional, but it's just too late to do anything about it.
We can't do anything. Doggone it.
Yep. So we can't fix it because we're too close to an election. And then I guarantee if you try to contact your state representatives to talk about ballot access law, they're like, the election's years away. We don't need to worry about that. It's like the old joke about the farmer with the leaky roof, right? That when it's raining, it's too wet to go up and fix it. And when it's not raining, it doesn't leak.
Exactly. And I again, I think this is an important conversation to have, because if we're concentrating on 2026 and 2028, we're going to be walking, and this is to the audience, not necessarily to you, Mike. We're going to be walking this same road again. Because I know in Indiana, it doesn't matter whether you're running for Congress, governor, secretary of state, you can run president, you still have to get, well, it's different. If you run for like mayor, you don't have to get as many signatures, but you still have to go through the signature process. Maybe, I don't know, reducing the number, because I know Mississippi had like 250. I'm like, I could get 250 by myself. Just send me down there and I'll go. I wish I lived in a state that only had 250. I live in a state where it's 2% of the vote for Secretary of State. Now I know that. Don't ask audience how I know that, but now I do know that. But what I think our audience wants to know is, in terms of ballot access, what can we do to fight back? I know you said, call your representatives, but if you have a representative like mine, who's a Republican, they'll do that same thing. Well, the election is 2 years away, but no, I'm still going to call you.
Yeah. I am a bit of a fan of a theory by a professor named Thomas Ferguson. It's called the investment theory. His idea is that our politics is governed not by like the median voter and the parties just trying to chase that median voter, that it's really governed by investment. That these systems are made so terribly complicated and difficult that only those who have organized money on their side, as opposed to organized people, that organized money can hire a bunch of lawyers like me. And I'll tell you, man, there were rooms full of them that we were up against during the campaign. They can hire all the professional help they need to navigate this stuff. And we are left at a disadvantage then. So I've got a nonprofit that aims to try to teach, for example, legal basics, to try to narrow the gap a little bit, the Rocky Mountain Political Law Institute. And we can do that kind of thing, that we can pool our people power and try to gather up these groups. Like, it sounds like it's already rubbed off on you, like you've learned that ballot access requirement, right? So you become a source of information and knowledge and leadership there in your jurisdiction, where you contain, and it's your duty to carry that information out. And it's almost like a chainmail kind of thing. You need to find 3 people, Tracy, and make sure that they also know how many signatures it takes to do that. So sharing that kind of knowledge and raising money is going to be necessary, because we will sometimes require lawyers that have to be hired and are not part of the movement and won't work for as ridiculously cheap as a guy like me will. But maybe the main thing, though, is to remember that when we ran into all this opposition, it was because we were threatening the status quo. It was because we mattered. It was because we were genuinely shaking things up. And so I think that maybe the biggest thing is remember that when you're getting this kind of opposition, when we run into this, and we will, that it's not a sign that things are going badly. It's a sign that things are going great, that we are encountering the opposition because we are in a struggle for political power, and it's not going to be a pillow fight.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I'm like, well, what can I do? I can pick up the phone and call my legislator, like, hey, look, why don't you, well, I would still say pay a fee, because that's literally what I believe. But since I already know what state I live in, it doesn't, to the people, I'm saying this to, again, the audience, not necessarily you, Mike. It doesn't, most state reps have it where you can email them. You could just send them an email and say, hey, this is not fair. It's a person's right not to run with the uniparty. If they want to run with the unicorn party, the Care Bear party, Justice for All Party. It should not matter. They have a constitutional right to run for office, and our laws are purposely making it difficult. Change the law. Now, my email will go a little bit further because I'm going to give them suggestions because that's just me. But you can do that. So before we go, okay, so this pump is really agitating me today. I'm sorry, everybody. It just keeps going off. I'm like, I know, I got to change it. 2 challenges that I give at the end of every show. It's going to be 3 this time. Number 1 challenge is to sign up for the Saturday Hangout. It's every 4th Saturday of the month starting March 22nd. It'll be probably after this show. You'll get a link. We'll go over there in Zoom. We'll discuss, debate, organize. That's the mantra for the Saturday Hangout. That's just once a month that you can do it. So register, and I'm leaving that link up a little bit longer on purpose. Remember to share this podcast with any of your friends. Sharing it helps us to get out there so that the algorithm can start recommending this show to other people. We need to get our viewership up. Of course, always subscribe. Second to last suggestion, I've always always said this: after this show airs, sometime like within an hour from now, go back to this video and write something in the comment section. If we get enough comments in the comment section, that's going to make YouTube think, oh, people are watching this. And then when they type in Cornel West, this podcast will come up. So if you can wait 1 hour after this show goes on the air, type in a comment. You can say, Tracy, you make me sick. Well, don't do that. That'll hurt my feelings. But just write some type of comment. So again, because we're not manipulating, we're encouraging the algorithm to suggest this show to other people. And lastly, make your $5 donation to the campaign. And I keep saying campaign. This is a movement. This is a moment and a movement. So donations are always appreciative. I'm giving a $5 challenge, and I'm going to keep giving a $5 challenge for everybody that's watching this and considers themselves to be a Justice for All supporter. You support the platform, you support Dr. West, or you're tired of the 2-party system and how they take advantage of you. Chip in $5. Every little bit helps. Mike, do you have any other thing you want to say before we head out?
Oh, I could go on and on, but no, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I'm glad we had this conversation. It's an unusual conversation, but I think it's one that needs to be had because we need to understand that, yes, and I'm about to use a Bible analogy for those that aren't Christian, but this is a David and Goliath type of situation. Goliath is showing his whole tail out here and is doing any and everything to keep us off the ballot. We need you to help us defeat Goliath, period. That's the easiest thing I can say. So thank you all for tuning in to this educational show. And remember to tune in to episode 3. I think I can say it. I think I can let you all know that Dr. West is scheduled to be on this show next week. We're 99% certain. So remember to tune in next week. And of course, I'll announce it Tuesday. So remember to like, share, comment an hour later, donate your $5. I'm taking us down. We'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day. And thank you, Mike, for coming. I greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.